Wait, Sutton's mom is a therapist. A licensed therapist. Because, honestly, she doesn't exactly radiate warmth and compassion. I've never been Sutton's biggest fan, but after watching that episode where she went to Georgia with Kyle and Garcelle, I actually felt real empathy for her. Unfortunately, some truly awful people find their way into the mental health profession. Bravo alone has given us some prime examples. Candiace's mom, Real Housewives of Potomac, a therapist. Greg from Married to Medicine, a psychiatrist. And both textbook abusive and narcissistic. Quick disclaimer, plenty of wonderful people go into mental health work, but let's be real, there are definitely some bad apples. My theory, RHOBH is a narcissist. And if there's one thing narcissists excel at, it's putting on a great show for anyone outside their immediate circle. They're charming, dynamic, and know exactly how to perform empathy. If you've ever had a narcissist in your life, you know the struggle. You vent about them, and people respond with, "What? Your mother, but she's my therapist." She's so supportive with her tough love and dry wit. Maybe it's just a bad edit, but I doubt it. I've never really warmed up to Sutton. When she first came on the scene, I thought she'd be a background player. But then came the whole debacle with Crystal and the racism issues with Garcelle. Definitely not a great introduction. Fast forward 5 years, and I still don't like her. She's just boring. Sure, I get that every group needs someone to stir the pot, and she might have her moments of being funny, but I don't find her humor appealing at all. The fact that she's somehow managed to form a friendship with Garcelle, and maybe Kyle, doesn't change the obvious. This group isn't exactly a tight-knit circle of friends. As for her drama with Dorrit, it's never going to be resolved because these two just don't like each other, and that's not changing. Every season, Sutton's behavior is like watching a toddler throw a tantrum, and honestly, I'm over it. I'm pretty neutral about most of the women. They all have their moments, good and bad, and let's face it, that's what makes the show interesting. Sutton's just frustrating at this point. Like you said, she acts like a child, and it's honestly not cute anymore, especially when she tries to play the role of this empowered, badass woman who's always putting others in their place. It doesn't work because she doesn't have the presence to back it up. I'm sure she's a perfectly nice person, but she really needs to understand that her badass persona isn't her vibe. In the earlier seasons, she was all about playing small and delicate, but now she's trying to mix that with being the one who tells everyone off. It just doesn't fit. She'd be better off adopting a more indifferent attitude, like she couldn't care less, which would probably frustrate the other women more and eventually make them lose interest. You can't argue with someone who doesn't give a damn. Honestly, I used to find her quirky in a weird way, but after this last episode, yeah, making fun of someone for not having money, that's just gross. Watching the Goodbye Kyle episode is honestly a gut punch. It's hard to get through, especially knowing it marks the end of the friendship between the only two original housewives who actually had each other's backs. After that moment, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills was never the same. I mean, once the last two OG aren't friends anymore, it completely shifted the whole vibe of the show moving forward. LVP and Kyle's friendship was hands down my favorite, and it's like watching the same kind of breakup I had with my ex-best friend. So yeah, it's pretty sad and honestly a little depressing to watch it all fall apart. But then again, in a weird way, it's also shockingly real, minus the whole millionaire thing. It really captures how, sometimes, life is just tough. People you thought would be there forever vanish, and it's a lot more common than we'd like to admit. Oh, the Housewives saga, where opinions are as strong as the drama. Let's dive in. Most universally hated. Well, I think Diana Jenkins might just win that crown. The woman was on a whole new level of delusional evil. It's like she lived in a world of her own, where logic and basic decency didn't exist. If she's not number one in the hate rankings, then it's definitely 8.5, I assume that's another gem of a housewife. Honestly, I haven't seen a single positive post about her, so I might just have to bump her up to number 1 for sheer universal dislike. Now, for the universally loved, that's a bit trickier. You've got people like Candy or Neen who seem to have broad fan bases, but let's be real, they're also polarizing at times. Bethany was adored before she turned into, well, whatever that was in her later seasons, though I was with her on the Carol drama, for what it's worth. But universally loved, it's hard to say, maybe LVP, but honestly, I wouldn't say anyone on Housewives is a saint, right? As for who's the richest, Diana Jenkins takes that prize too. Followed closely by 8.5 in the hated and wealthy category. Kathy Hilton. She might seem rich, but I've heard Hilton SR didn't leave his kids much actual cash. Still, her assets are something to behold. And Tilly's got the cash to back it up, no doubt. On RHOBH, Joyce might get the nod for least divisive, but let's be honest, does anyone remember her? Not exactly a universal favorite, more like the girl you vaguely recall from a couple of seasons ago. Teddy's another one who earned her spot in the hated camp. In conclusion, Housewives fans, we know you love to hate and hate to love, but I think we can all agree the drama is always worth it. Honestly, I'm completely fine with Sutton's wallet comment. Dorit has been poking at her for seasons, and now Sutton's finally had enough. Dorit gets exactly what she deserves. After all, she's been a complete nightmare for years. And don't even get me started on this whole boss thing. It's just a PR move to clean up her act, especially with how she's treated people of color. I'm curious to see how she handles Boz once she and Kyle are back to playing nice again. The show's entire premise is about flaunting wealth, designer bags, massive houses, expensive cars, but the second someone dares to mention they have more money than the others, suddenly everyone's clutching their pearls and looking around like it's the most vulgar thing they've ever heard. If this were Love Island, sure, we call it trashy, but we're talking about a show that's basically just one big, glittery flex. Unless, of course, they want to pretend that money never mattered to them, which is laughable. I get why Sutton was annoyed, though. That's one of those thoughts you keep to yourself and let it go. Talking about money in front of a full table. Yeah, that's tacky. But let's be real, Dorit was actively poking the bear, and Sutton's frustration was totally justified. And you know what? I don't care that Sutton went after Dorit. Honestly, go ahead, Sutton. Let her have it. It's part of the job, and they don't exactly have a warm and fuzzy relationship. Sutton's resentment is totally valid. That said, I do think Dorit gets way more heat for stuff others would never get called out on. Looking at you, Kyle, who's been way nastier to Sutton than Dorit ever has. What I didn't love, though, was how Sutton chose to insult Dorit. The insult itself. Meh, whatever. It was low, but it's not the attack that bothered me. It's the how and the why. The choice of words said a lot more about Sutton than it did about Dorit. It came across as classist, and that's what rubbed me the wrong way. Honestly, I can't stand it when people go for age or weight either. Both are just cheap shots. So yeah, what Sutton said wasn't great, but not because she was mean to Dorit. It's the underlying message that I didn't love. Watching the girls tear into Lisa for the first time in season 4 is honestly wild. It's like, out of nowhere, they all decided to turn on her. The way they all randomly flipped, especially Brandi, is honestly infuriating. I get the vibe that Brandi was just jealous because Lisa was getting close to Kyle again, and it sent her into a meltdown. In Brandi's mind, it seemed like Lisa was ditching her, so she just snapped and started attacking. I used to like Brandi, but she just kept getting worse and worse, and I feel crazy for thinking that Lisa Vanderpump isn't the villain everyone makes her out to be. Brandi couldn't even pick a consistent reason to be mad at Lisa. First, she was complaining that Lisa was too much of a mom to her. Then it was because Lisa was spending time with Kyle again. After that, it was because of her friendship with Sheena. And then, the cherry on top, she accused Lisa of manipulating her. Honestly, it's like she just threw random complaints at the wall to see what would stick. And don't even get me started on Yolanda. She was just itching for a fight with no real reason at all. Lisa's defense: total disaster. But honestly, at that point, it didn't matter. They had already made up their minds, especially Kyle. She didn't stand a chance. I'm pretty sure we're watching the same episodes right now, but I've definitely seen this before. Sure, Lisa can be manipulative. She's a master at it, really, but you'll notice she runs the same play with different people over and over again. She's entertaining, but I'd argue she's not exactly genuine. In the end, they're all terrible people and friends, but compared to Brandy, Lisa comes out looking way better. And while I don't think Lisa is the absolute villain here, it's like they all just decided to team up and attack her for no good reason. Season 6 of The Real Housewives was one big, dramatic mess, and let's be honest, the whole chronic Lyme disease saga with Yolanda was the most frustrating part. First off, chronic Lyme disease doesn't even exist, so whatever diagnosis she got is pretty much a complete fabrication. She even admitted in her biography that she went doctor shopping. She initially got a diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome, which, by the way, is real. But she wasn't happy with that, so off she went in search of something juicier. Honestly, that gives a bit of weight to the Munchausen's accusations. Now, let's not be completely heartless. I'm sure Yolanda was feeling terrible, especially considering her crumbling marriage and the harsh treatments she was enduring, 90-day antibiotics. Yikes. But still, the whole thing is riddled with inconsistencies. What really got to me is how easily Yolanda deflects any criticism by drowning the conversation in emotion. Seriously, just throw on the waterworks, and voila, instant sympathy. Before season 6, she was one of the biggest mean girls in the group, so seeing her suddenly transform into this pitiful victim is, well, a sight. She uses her illness as a shield, and somehow, everyone else is too scared to call her out. And then, of course, Rinna gets sucked right into that emotional trap, acting as if she's a martyr trying to protect Yolanda, when in reality, she brought up the Munchausen's accusations first, no matter how much she tries to spin it otherwise. But it doesn't stop there. Rinna keeps pushing the idea that Yolanda is using her illness for sympathy, and somehow LVP gets dragged into the mess, becoming the villain because of some vague off-screen plotting. Maybe Rinna's brain just knew things. And then, Yolanda caps it all off by bursting into tears at the reunion, effectively ending any further discussion. Boom, case closed. The whole thing was a hot mess. Sure, maybe the M word should have been off limits, but if the women weren't so emotionally inept and incapable of actually discussing the issue like adults, maybe it wouldn't have spiraled out of control. The real kicker? Yolanda might have had a very personal and very financially motivated reason for all this drama. You see, her prenup had a clause that promised a much larger alimony payout if she were to fall seriously ill. So here comes the doctor shopping, looking for a chronic illness diagnosis to guarantee a fat check after the divorce. That's what bothered the other women, the idea that Yolanda might be faking for a long-term payout. It's not that they thought she was faking it for sympathy. They thought she was faking it to secure her future. And honestly, can you blame them? Oh, absolutely. Let's just hand him a key while we're at it. You're over here desperately trying to have a baby with a guy who hasn't even told you he loves you yet. But sure, let him waltz in and out of your place like it's his home. Brilliant idea. Really. And honestly, never, ever give a key to someone you're casually dating. I once came home at 3 a.m. to find my ex sitting on my bed in the dark. No, I didn't give him a key. Here's the kicker. He borrowed my key once when the intercom was down, so naturally, he made a copy without telling me. Classic move, right? Oh, and don't even get me started on this whole fertility specialist thing. They don't even live together, but they're seeing doctors to plan a baby. Please. Who in their right mind would plan a pregnancy before they're serious enough to move in together? Sorry, but this whole boyfriend situation, not buying it.